Shabbos. This week is Parshas Noach, and the story of Noach is well known. God regrets that he created mankind after mankind becomes corrupted. He decides to bring a flood to destroy all of the world. Noach is Matzah Chen B'nei Hashem, finds favor in the eyes of God, and God requests Noach to build an ark to save his family, and 2 of every animal, 7 of the kosher animals, and after a long time, the ark rests on Mount Ararat, and he sends out a raven and a dove. And then he brings many offerings to God, and God instructs him from now on that he's allowed to eat meat, and not to make sure not to take the life of any other human being, and the story moves on from there. Now, the modern Jew or anyone in modern times will have a hard time relating to this story, because if you know a little bit about the evidence of a worldwide flood, you know that the evidence is that there was no worldwide flood, according to science. The geological evidence suggests that there was no flood that was worldwide. We have floods that we could see from, I believe, layers of sediment, and we could tell when they were over different parts of the earth, but worldwide didn't exist. Another problem is that according to the dates, the Egyptian Empire would have been still there, would have been present at that time, and there's no gap in the writings and the history of Egypt at that time. There's also, I've listened to a scientist say that there's just not enough water in the world to be able to flood the whole earth, and especially at the speed of which it was flooded. Again, you could say that was a miracle. God created water, but the simple scientific facts suggest otherwise. The other problem is that we know that there's other ancient cultures which had the story of a worldwide flood. So on the one hand, you could say that proves there was a flood. This is a story that was common throughout the population of the known world at that time. But the story predates the Torah, and it has different details. Again, that doesn't prove one way or the other. It could be their story is incorrect. The story given in the Torah is the correct one. But it raises a lot of issues. And one of the approaches that is given by commentators today is to make sure to understand the Torah from a different perspective. And the Torah isn't looked at necessarily as a book of history or science. Last week's portion, Bereshis, also presents many issues to the modern mind if you're studying science and know what the accepted theories are of how the world began and the age of the universe. So there's many different issues that affect us. But the way to look at it is that the stories are not a history or science, but it's a story of teaching us, stories which teach us morality and ethics. And as many commentators say, the story of the flood and its changes from the Epic of Gilgamesh could be understood in a very simple way. There's many similarities between that story, that epic, and the Torah's story in Noach. Pretty much, it's almost the same in regard to many of the facts, except a couple. One is that, of course, the name of the person, and also it says the reason the flood came. The reason the flood came was because the gods, in the plural, weren't able to sleep because there was too much noise here on earth, too many human beings. And they caused a lot of noise. God came down, he said, hey, or the gods came down and said, we can't handle this anymore. So he asked the hero of that story, Utnapishtim, to build an ark, save the animals and his family, and maybe some other people, and he was granted with immortality as a result. And also he brought many sacrifices when the flood was over. And there it says that when he brought the sacrifices, the gods gathered around the sacrifices like flies. Why? Because a year had gone by without any sacrifices, and the gods needed the sacrifices for food. They were hungry. So when you know these facts, and you look at the Torah story, you see that the changes are quite apparent. And when I say changes, in other words, the story existed. The Torah is not trying to tell you history. The Torah is telling you about legends which existed, and the Torah tries to turn those stories into morality stories. And just as an aside, there is some history to the flood, because again, some evidence suggests that at one point the Black Sea was a lake, was a freshwater lake, and it was separated from the Mediterranean by land. And at a certain point, the Mediterranean, the oceans of the world, rose, and they flooded that small piece of land, which is now the Bosphorus Strait, and the lake, which was on the other side, was on a lower level. And when the water came from the Mediterranean, it flooded many areas around the what's today the Black Sea. And there's evidence of cities, of numerous dwellings that were flooded around the Black Sea. So it quite well might be that there was a major flood in what was the known world at that time. And of course, what happens with stories are they become exaggerated. A flood came and destroyed many areas in what was known in the world of that time. And over time, the story, however many years that was before, over time, the story was that there was a great flood that destroyed all the world, and we were saved by somebody who built a boat, built an ark, and saved mankind and the animal world. So it's based on something, but then the Torah takes it and says, no, there's no gods, there's one God, the God of creation. And our God is not a human being writ large up in the sky who's worried about his sleep and the physical desires that we all have as human beings. No, our God is a God of morality. And when he saw that Rabba Ra'as Ha'adam, when there was a lot of evil in the world, that's when he said, "Vatishaches haaretz," the world is corrupted. There's chamas, there's stealing, violence in the world, and I need a plan B. Plan A didn't work. Mankind didn't turn out the way I thought. So he asked Noach, who's a tzaddik, who's a righteous person, to build an ark, because he's the one who's going to be matzah chen b'nei Hashem, to find favor in the eyes of God. And then he saves his immediate family. And where does he land after the flood? He lands on Har Ararat. And Ararat is in Turkey, which is strange. In the Torah stories, there's not too much talk about Turkey. There's a reference to, it talks about the different descendants of Noach. There's one called Torgama, which is Turkey. But as a location, as a physical location, it seems to be odd with the rest of the stories that we have in the Torah, because most of them are about Babylonia, Mesopotamia, modern day Iraq, rather than north in Turkey. And therefore, it could be answered by, the story originated with the Black Sea in the area of Turkey. And now Noach brings, to go back to the story, he brings many sacrifices. And what does it say? The one God doesn't eat the sacrifices. It says, "Vayarach Hashem es reach nichoach." God smells the sweet smell. And again, we like to read that metaphorically. It's not a God who has the power, the ability to smell and worries about what your cooking smells like down here on earth. But rather, it's taking what was, in a sense, a crude form of understanding the notion of sacrifice, that God needs food, and says, no, it's just the smell, it's the idea. It's the sense that the human beings want to become close to God, and offering up a sacrifice, an offering to be of a karbon Hashem, to bring like from the word karav, to be close to God. And again, we have to understand the nature of sacrifices, but it's taking something much more crude and making it something much more, much purer. And excuse me. And as a result, we can understand that the Torah understands that human beings have these stories, that mankind was suffused with these legends, and it wants to make sure that can't necessarily say, no, they're not true, that's not how it happened. That's not the issue that the Torah is worried about. That's not the concern of the Torah. The Torah is trying to make sure that the way we relate to history is one of morality, that there's one God, the creator of the world, and what that God cares about is that human beings should be righteous, like Noach, tzaddik tamim, purely a pure tzaddik b'darosav in his generations. Matzah chen b'nei Hashem, find favor in God's eyes. And from me'ela naftzah, from these, it says, from his descendants, that's what we want to have in this world. We want to have descendants of a Noach in this world, not descendants of Cain and Hevel, or Cain, who was a murderer, and all the problems that existed in the previous generations. And if we take that lesson, we could understand that we don't have to just look at the Torah stories and just sort of say, what does it mean to us? There's no meaning. It's not true. They're legends. They're myths. No, we have to try to understand what the purpose of the story is. What is the Torah trying to tell us? And as we move forward through the stories of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, the Avos and the Emos, the forefathers and foremothers, we have to understand that these are not just stories. They're lessons for us. We have to take away what are the character traits that the Torah is trying to instill in us. And if we look at the Torah that way, it becomes much more relevant, and the ideas are still we have a lot still that we could take from the Torah that might not have been understood in previous generations. And hopefully we look at the Torah this way, and we start reading the Torah, we start understanding it from a new perspective. Good Shabbos.